everybody. This is Cheyenne Williams-Brown. I'm part of the Education Department at the Appel Center for Performing Arts. More specifically, I focus on dance. And today I'll be interviewing Constance DiNapoli, who had the privilege of working with the Paul Taylor Dance Company in her career. And currently, she is the director of the Paul Taylor American Modern Dance Summer Intensive. And she is adjunct faculty at the Johns Hopkins University and University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And I met Ms. DiNapoli when I attended the Paul Taylor Intensive myself when I was in college years ago. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to see you again.
Me too. So what have you been doing these days?
Well, I just finished grading my finals and posting my grades for the University of Maryland. I was teaching a technique class there and a couple of a writing class. The other thing that just got postponed is that my Paul Taylor Summer Intensive, because it was supposed to be housed at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, I had to cancel that. So we'll have to shoot for 2021, which we moved. When you took the intensive, it was at Peabody, but we moved it to the UMBC because I needed more space. I needed large, big studios so we could all eat up the space. And that was very successful last year. So I hope to continue with that in 2021. We are offering a virtual version this year, but it's coming out of California because then everyone can participate. If we started at 9 a.m. here, the Californians wouldn't be up yet.
Right.
So it's coming out of USC, where my colleague Patrick Corbin and Rachel Berman will be directing it. But all of us are giving them input and help.
That's a great
I am also faculty at the School of the Washington Ballet, and unfortunately all of those classes have gone virtual, and that's the summer plans as well, where I would be part of their intensive. So we're still figuring that one out because there's many levels, many ages. We were hoping in DC we could at least do small groups, but it's not looking like that for the summer. So I don't really know how that's going to play out. I'm disappointed because, like you and I just said, we miss moving in the studio, and doing this in a room in front of a Zoom or some sort of Blackboard Google share thing doesn't really work very well.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's really not.
No.
When you are teaching at the universities, what do you teach?
I teach generally a lot of technique classes, modern dance technique. I've taught dance history, dance appreciation. I've taught conditioning classes. I teach regularly right now composition and improvisation at Hopkins and composition there. I teach choreography, repertory, a variety of dance-related, some somatics practices. So, what a dance major would need for the whole course, the whole, degree.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. The whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So when did you begin dancing?
In high school, I was a gymnast, and I loved the floor exercise. So I started taking dance to support that. And then I realized that I really liked the dance portion of it better than the tricks portion of it. So I was very casually, though, studying dance through high school. And so when I chose to go to college, I decided to try to pursue a program nearby that would give me a kind of a conservatory training. So I went to Stanford University and I rode my bike into Palo Alto and studied like the high school girls at this very fine Pacific Dance Center, where I had 6 days a week, full curriculum with ballet, modern, jazz, composition, partnering, pas de deux, point work, the whole thing that I hadn't had yet. And so I did that, paralleling my degree work at Stanford.
Wow. So that kind of happens like a little late, as people would say in the
Yeah,
dance world.
absolutely. I was an athlete growing up, so I skied and skated and played all the sports. And my mother tried to get me in dance when I was young, but I didn't want to have anything to do with pink tights and pink shoes. I was too much of more of a outdoorsy kind of athlete.
Well, that's amazing that even though you started at an older age, your career like took off, like most amazing career. That
Yeah, I think it's about how you apply yourself when the time is needed and how you super focus and drive yourself to attain the goal that you're going for, and be very efficient with that
that's so
work.
true.
Yeah.
So when did you realize you wanted to dance professionally?
So while I was training at the Pacific Dance Center I think it was between my sophomore and junior year, he brought in, it was directed by Richard Gibson from Joffrey Ballet, and he brought in a lot of guests, one being Egal Perry, who's very famous and has Perry Dance in New York. And he picked me out and asked me to be in his piece that he was choreographing. And then that summer, he was asked to be the director of Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival.
Wow.
And at the time, it was you were chosen to go for the whole 9 weeks. Now they divide it up by genre, and then you only go for 3 weeks. Well, I went as a scholarship student for 9 weeks. And each week, a different dance company came and we got master classes with them, and then we would see them on stage. And so, I was being a scholarship student, I had to take tickets or hand out programs or work the box, all kinds of different things. But the opportunity to see all that dance really put in my mind, well, maybe I could be a professional dancer. And before that, I hadn't really thought I came from a small town. I came from Rochester, Minnesota. So I had really not the big city view of a career in dance.
That's amazing. I always have wanted to go to Jacob's Pillow. Just haven't had a chance yet.
Special. It's a very special place. And the year I was there, it was the 50th anniversary. So this was 1982. And because Egal choreographed a quartet for us when I was out there, we performed in their gala that year. And so I was on stage and shared a dressing room with Cynthia Gregory from American Ballet Theater. So I was like, wow, I really, we signed the wall together.
Oh my gosh.
So, but it was such an eye-opening experience to see all these people, meet all these people, and be exposed to all those different dance styles and different companies. And that's where I first saw the Paul Taylor Dance Company. And I was like, oh, it had the physicality that gymnastics had the musicality that I loved, had the personality and the variety of pieces that each program presented that really caught my interest.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you when you were trying to start your professional career?
So after that summer, I went back and finished college. And then when I graduated, I actually stayed one more year in San Francisco to work and make a lot of money. I was dancing with a dance company named Dancer Stage, and it was directed by Christine Elliott from American Ballet Theater and Yehuda Mayor from Bat Dor Company in Israel. So it had a ballet modern connection, and I performed a lot of European choreographers like Rudy van Danzig, Glenn Tetley, Hans van Manen, and then Yehuda was a choreographer. I danced a lot of his work, and he had Graham training, so I kind of got that. And I had modern dance training in Palo Alto, so I kind of got a blend of it, and so I was doing all of that. I worked actually this is kind of cool, I worked at the Punchline, which is the comedy club in the Embarcadero where Robin Williams used to drop in.
Wow.
Yeah, he used to improv on occasion with one of his favorite buddies, and he would sneak in the back and hang out with us waitresses, and then he'd just like surprise everybody and go on stage.
Oh my gosh.
So that was pretty cool. And that summer I did the comedy festival that they have in Golden Gate Park with a bunch of famous comedians. But that was my bread and butter. That made all those tips. I made a lot of money, and I saved that money. And then I moved to New York that next year. And that was I wanted to have money so I wouldn't have to, I didn't really want to have to go to New York and cocktail waitress there to support myself, because how are you going to audition if you're on your feet till 2 a.m?
Right.
So that was my plan of attack, sort of.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so then I did do that. And I immediately started, because I had seen Taylor, I started training at the Graham School. I started, the Taylor School didn't have a school, but they would have workshops. Mm-hmm. So I attended a couple of workshops, and I guess it was maybe the second workshop, Mr. Taylor came in and watched the class, and he said to me, "How would you like to dance in my company?" And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Of course. But he said, "I don't have a spot right now, but why don't you give me your name and I'll reach out to you and your number when I do." So I actually went back to to San Francisco to do one more performance that fall. And then he called me because somebody hurt their knee, and he asked me to come in and start understudying.
Oh my gosh.
So that was lucky. I didn't have to audition.
Wow.
He had me start understudying. I worked for them, and then he actually put me on the schedule to learn all of these parts as an understudy, and then he just merged me into the company. We didn't even have to wait till that girl got better. The girl that hurt her knee, she got better. He didn't wait for someone to leave. He just added me. And then eventually someone else did leave for some other reason. But so that was nice. That was really nice.
That is amazing.
But that shows you have to know your understudy roles, right? So you're hired as an understudy. You learn as much. No one's teaching it to you. You have to learn on the side. You have to gather them, ask questions after rehearsal if they're willing to give you answer your questions or give you some pointers, and you have to practice all by yourself, because then you never know the day someone's going to say, "Oh, I can't go in," and you have to jump right in. You have to know your stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Understudies are so underrated. It's probably the hardest job.
It is. You have to be ready at a moment's notice.
And
that happened. That spring when we had our New York season, I had been understudying all these roles, and actually one girl did get hurt, and they called me on stage and put me in the costume, and away I went.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I had a similar situation, but flipped. I was injured, and an understudy had to jump into a performance. So I can't imagine what it was like for her, but speaking to you about it, you made the most of it. Helped.
Yeah.
It helped you get on your feet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's like a dream come true. Just Paul Taylor asking you to join the company. Wow.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he had seen me that week, and it was, like I said, when I moved to New York, I was super focused. So I was in class every morning. I was on my game every day. I knew if perchance I would get this chance, I wanted to be there and be in my best shoes, without being with shoes, dancing barefoot, really in the right frame of mind and the right look. And I think there were certain things about my movement quality, also my body type, that my hair, I don't know, who knows what. He always told me he loved my big hands. I have very big hands for a lady, and Paul does a lot of posture and gesture.
Yeah.
And of course, my red hair stands out in a room. So, I don't know. Who knows? He likes a palette of colors when he picks dancers. He wants a little bit of everything. So I must have looked, fit his paint palette.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah.
So, can you describe to me the moment where you felt like, okay, like I made it?
It was soon after being in the Taylor Company and, sort of earning my stripes, being early on, you're given a bunch of roles and you're learning so much from, I was dancing with David Parsons and Christopher Gillis, and they're just amazing partners giving me all this information, learning from the women in the company, Reagan Wood and Kathy McCann and Linda Kent. I learned a lot of her parts, so she taught me so much. And then the parts are yours. And then when you perform them on stage, the nice thing about Mr. Taylor is he didn't expect me to look exactly like somebody. He wanted me to take the role and make it my own. And he might give me a hint sometimes, like, you're tall, so do this one like a fashion model instead of quirky like she did it, do it more elegant or whatever,
Yeah.
So he'd give you a little bit of that, or then you could artistically play with that, which was lovely. And his work is so varied that, one program might be a dancey piece where you're long and elegant and have beautiful lines and beautiful space patterns with the other dancers swooping around, feeling, like dancey. And then the next piece would be dark and painful, and you were groveling on the floor and you had to go into a very dark space in your head. And then the next piece was probably a powerhouse, something like Esplanade or something that it was aerobically super challenging. And sometimes the audience would clap before you even started because it was such a signature work and people knew it. So it was very satisfying artistically. So I think early in those first few years, having all of that brought to life, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so lucky.
Yeah. So, I'm really curious now, what were the rehearsal processes like with Mr. Taylor?
At the time we didn't always have, now the school has class every morning, so dancers can take class, but a lot of us would go. I would actually either go to a Pilates studio and do Pilates before class. Sometimes I would swim before class to get loose. I usually did my swimming after the day to kind of wind down. I took Maggie Black's ballet class with all the other professional dance company soloists, principals, dancers we kind of all went to her because she would sort of do a very basic class just to kind of get us on our leg for the day, and then we could go do whatever else we had to do for the rest of the day. But that was a nice environment to be with other, Joffrey, APT, City Ballet, Graham, Twyla, all of those members were all in one room, and we were all sort of bonding in that way. And then so we'd show up for Paul, and it was either a choreographic process time period or a rehearsal period or both. So if he was choreographing, you'd have to be ready for anything. You didn't know what he was going to do, and he'd come in. We had 2 studios. He'd come into the second studio and he'd say, oh, okay, I need Connie, and all these people. And we'd go in, and he might have a grand scheme idea, or he might not, and he might have just a small little idea, and he might want to work with 1 or 2 of us. He generally liked starting with a smaller group rather than all of us at once, and sort of make some seed ideas, seed movement, seed themes that then the piece would grow from. So we would probably do a choreographic process with Paul for a couple hours, like 12 to 2. He would have a set amount of minutes, like usually 2 minutes or something he'd want to get done every day. And then he would leave, and Betty Dion, the rehearsal director, she would then run us through rehearsals of the repertory that we're building for the season, for the tour. And at that point, we might have a rehearsal where she's like acting as a traffic cop and say I was the new person going into Mercure Tidings. So we'd run like a traffic rehearsal where everyone was adjusting to, okay, here you go, you got to fit in that slot, and then she turned the music on and you'd have to do it. So that's the kind of afternoon we'd have, maybe doing the traffic kind of rehearsal and then run the piece, or just run some repertory. And then we do a lot of understudy. I'd be teaching someone my part, someone would be teaching me their part. We do a lot of afternoon understudy. And then sometimes, at the time I was in the company, a lot of the men and the women were choreographing on the side. So after 5 o'clock, we might rehearse. I would rehearse with Carla Wolfangle, Christopher Gillis was always making work on a group of us. So we would do sometimes rehearsals after that. I tended to then, like I said, wind down by either going to my Pilates trainer and she'd like put me on the barrel and stretch me out so I'd be even again. Or I'd go swimming to kind of lengthen out of my thighs because the work is hard on your up legs. And so I'd get sort of stretched out at the end and then collapse and start over the next day.
Right. So how often were the rehearsals?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. Monday through Friday. We tended to have Saturdays and Sundays off when we were rehearsing in New York. Now on tour, it's a whole different routine because on tour, you don't have to get to the theater till noon maybe or 1, you warm up. And then you run your rehearsal in the afternoon on stage. And then you have a tiny little break and then you run the show. And depending on how long you're staying in one city, maybe you don't have to have those rehearsals after you've done the couple of rehearsals for how many programs. It depends on how many programs you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then you could have a little bit more daytime free to go see the sights and stuff and have a good time before showing up for the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite moment on tour that you remember?
Oh, gosh. Well, my husband came to all the good spots, like Hawaii and London and Paris. My mom came in a couple of ones. She came to Rome and she came to Paris. So those are highlights when someone met me. But performing or just sightseeing?
Either one.
Either one? Well, Paris Opera is a pretty amazing stage, and it's huge. And we would stay there for a whole week or maybe 2 weeks even. And so we would have, Paul was receiving a lot of the French honor awards, so he would be with us too. And the audience loved him. So sometimes they would clap even before we'd start, which was cool. I do have a Nureyev moment though, because I was performing Cloven Kingdom, and I'm the girl with this big ball on top of my head in a bright green dress, and I have to like leap across the stage, down upstage upstage right to downstage left, and then I have to run around the wing to come across again.
Oh wow. And
as I'm running across the wing in the dark, because at the moment I have to run really fast and then put this ball on my head and then make that dash on stage. Nureyev was walking in the crossway in black leather and a black hat. I did not see him. I totally ran him over and kept going. And I had to greet him at the party afterwards and say, that was me that plowed into you. I'm very sorry, but I had to make my entrance.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Like, no, I only have 8 counts. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Yep. So that's a sort of a funny moment. There was some beautiful, I love being in Budapest. That was fascinating. Istanbul was fascinating. Sicily was exquisite. The whole French Riviera was just beautiful. And we were a small company, so there were 16 of us, and there was always a friend who would want to go do some of the sites that you wanted to do. So we did a lot of exploring. It was great. It was really great. I've been to all around the world. I've been on every continent except Antarctica, but we went to Alaska and I went on a helicopter. So I guess I can kind of say I was in the tundra.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, it was great. This was the late 80s and the early 90s. We went on a lot of State Department tours. In Hong Kong, we went to the embassy and had a huge party. In Hungary, the same. We were representing the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so incredible that dance allowed you to go around the world. It just took you to so many places. So
wonderful. Yeah, it's lovely.
Well, what advice do you have for dancers that are trying to pursue a professional career?
Well, I think I've already said that the demands of a professional career are high, and the numbers are not in your favor. And there's, especially right now, the funding in the arts is not good, and the companies don't have the resources to pay dancer salaries. And, there's not, it's hard to find a job. I mean, the competition is tough. And the marketing skills that all of you need to have now with the internet and all of that to reach out, and in one way it's good because you can see so much, but then you also have to market yourself in that way. You don't just show up at an audition, right?
Yeah.
So I would recommend really doing your research, finding a place where you think you might fit. I mean, I felt like I was a good fit, and I really put my eggs in that basket and showed up at Mr. Taylor's studio. I mean, I also, got a lot of advice along the way from professionals in the field, kind of guiding me that, yes, you could do this. And I think he might like you. Martha Graham evidently hated redheads, so why should I bother with that? Somebody gave me that advice. That was good advice, right? She evidently had a sister that she didn't like who was a redhead. Yeah. So, I mean, you need to do your research and then spend time you have to show that you're really committed to learning the style, mastering the style. You're going to be there, and, maybe someone will notice. And then, going on, you also want to find a balance. You can't just be a dancer anymore. You have to balance your life with other interests, other art interests, other collaborative interests, other financial means to support yourself so that you can then be the artist. I mean, that's a lot to balance. I mean, I ended up, after having 3 boys, I transitioned along that way into teaching. Luckily, because of my connections, I was able to get a lot of jobs, and I then went on to get my MFA. In hindsight, I wish I would have gotten my MFA sooner, but I was raising 3 children in Cincinnati, and there wasn't a location there in Cincinnati to get my master's degree in dance. It was 2 hours away in Columbus, Ohio, and I wouldn't have been able to do that with baby at home and all of that. So I wish I had been in a location where I could have maybe juggled that a little sooner in my life, to make the transition into higher ed sooner. But it's been fine. I've maintained great jobs, and, Mr. Taylor always supported me all the way through my transition to motherhood and gave me work directing the intensives, teaching the intensives, staging his work. I staged his repertory on ballet companies, modern companies. He sent me to Taipei, Taiwan to set a work on Cloudgate. So, I've been able to cobble together a career from a mixture of things while maintaining, my life as a mother and, a wife too, maintaining a household. So I think you need to find what balance works for you. Some people choose the choreography route. I chose to just really focus on teaching. I do a lot of choreography, but I really focused. I love being around all ages. So I teach anyone from, at Chautauqua, I was full faculty there, and I taught 3-year-olds to the adults. So, I felt like that was something I have energy, and I have a passion for giving my art form. So I felt like teaching was really my calling.
Yes, the balancing is very important, and I will definitely take that with me as I am, transitioning further into my teaching career. So I appreciate that advice.
Yeah.
But you do have a teaching gift. I love all the things that I've learned from you at the Paul Taylor Intensive. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was really wonderful hearing about your experiences. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you again. Call me for anything else if you want to collaborate in other ways. You're not that far. Your school isn't that far from me. I went to a swim meet with my son in York.
Okay.
So, yeah, if we get back to in-person stuff, face-to-face,
yeah,
I can come and run around the dance studio with your kids.
Oh, I would love that.
That'd be neat.
Thank you so much, Connie.
All right, you're welcome. Take care.
You too.
Stay well.
You too.